what do you know? It's not in the circus directorial debut. I mean, he has directed 2 other movies besides this one. Even I didn't know that. My name is Daidarius and welcome to the review of Mowgli. So Mowgli is yet another filmatization of the Jungle Book, but luckily this one sticks out in the story department because it doesn't follow the usual story that we connect with the Jungle Book. You know, Mowgli is raised by wolves, brought to them by Bagheera. Then he is forced to leave the wolf pack, befriends Baloo, then gets kidnapped by the monkey, gets almost eaten by the snakes, befriends the elephants, then fights Scar. Not Scar, that's the Lion King. He fights Shere Khan, and then he gets back to the human village. That's pretty much the story that we know around the Jungle Book. Then, of course, there was the more shorter version with Jon Favreau's edition a couple years back. But this one, however, doesn't follow that at all. It kind of does, but I will get to that. However, it's not a secret that Bagheera finds Mowgli, he brings them to the wolf pack, and then he asks them to raise him as a wolf. And then later on, Shere Khan gets back into town and he wants to kill Mowgli because the tiger is crazy. I don't know. He's just bloodthirsty. So now we have the fight between Mowgli and Shere Khan with his wolf friends, and Bagheera and Baloo's in there too, and so is Car, and there's an elephant, and there's a lot of stuff in there. But the most importantly, the story is about him trying to find a way to live as a wolf and then come to terms with his human side, and then he needs to fight Shere Khan. There's a lot of things going on in this movie, but I'm gonna get to that. So, what did I like about this movie? Well, first of all, the most huge improvement this movie could have brought, it did bring, and that is changing up the story, because we have seen this story done so many times before. We can even narrate it in our sleep. That's how many times we have seen it. So I appreciate that they brought along a new kind of story, a different take on the Mowgli Jungle Book adventures thingy. What do we call that? It's not even a cinematic experience. Let's just say extravaganza then. Especially when we just have had a live action Jungle Book creation. So this needs to stick out. It needs to do something different. And it did. What it did, it's kind of an improvement and kind of not. But I'll get to that when we get to the cons. However, just the fact that they wanted to change up the mythology around Mowgli a bit just really helped me digest this movie as a new addition to the Jungle Book franchise. Now, I haven't read any of the Jungle Book books. I believe there's more than one. I haven't researched this because I don't really want to read the books. But anyways, I haven't read them, so I don't know if this is a more genuine adaptation of the Jungle Books, because we know that Disney are infamous of childrenize, making stories more family friendly so they can advertise them towards, well, families. So they might have shone some light on the darker parts of the story. Nonetheless, I like the fact that it changed up the story so it wasn't exactly the same. I also like the visuals for the most part, especially since Jon Favreau have just made the former live action adaptation 2 years prior. So this movie shouldn't look photorealistic with its animals, and it doesn't. It looks more like a 3D cartoon at some point. It even goes haywire with the proportions of a lot of animals. And I know that Car is usually depicted as this humongous snake. It is also here, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about the proportion. I'm talking about the facial aspect of these characters, because not only do they look more expressive and cartoonish, but they also resemble their actor or actress counterpart. And I like that fact. So when you see Bagheera, you kind of get a glimpse of Christian Bale in there, and when you see Baloo, you kind of get a glimpse of Andy Serkis in there, and the same goes to Benedict Cumberbatch as Shere Khan or Kate Blanchett as, you know, Car. And I appreciate the aspect that I wanted to go a different route than what we have seen come before. I don't know, I'm going in circles here, but we need to address this. And I also appreciate the visual just in general, because this movie really shines at some points. I mean, it's not photorealistic and it's not realistic at most parts of this movie, but the environment does feel real and it does feel alive and seems like a real living, breathing jungle, and the jungle in itself is kind of a character in this movie. I just think they pull it off. I also need to give some props to Rohan Chand. He is playing Mowgli in this movie, and since he's mostly playing opposite of digital animals. He didn't have too much to act off. That's a weird sentence, off. Anyways, but he did a genuine good job for the most part. Even at some points, he did an amazing job. The acting, however, is a bit choppy in this movie, and the same goes for the voice cast. But for the most part, I did buy into their acting and the depicting of their characters. So props for that. And then that's pretty much how I can sum up the good things about this movie. It has a nice character, it has some nice acting, it has some great visual aspect, it did something different with the story. I wanted that from a movie, but yeah, I need to jump into the cons because I need to address this. So let's go to what I didn't like about this movie. So what didn't I like about this movie? Well, I didn't like the story. And I know I just appreciated the story was different, but different doesn't mean great, because this story is clunky. It's very, very clunky. It doesn't really know what it wants, and it doesn't really know what it wants with its characters. It just seems like that this movie contains a lot of small, separate stories that are kind of connected, but not in a big way, which means that this movie just feels disjointed a lot of times. You have the first part where Mowgli needs to be trained to becoming a wolf, and then you just have where he goes to the human village and stays there, and then you have the end conflict, and then there is a lot of things sprayed in there just to pad out the time, and it doesn't really work. So what I ended up with was that I felt disconnected to the movie, and I also felt like at some times I wasn't paying enough attention. And it doesn't mean that I was doing something else. All of my being was just focusing on the movie and watching the movie and appreciate the movie when I could appreciate the movie, but it still kind of distracted me for a genuine experience, and it kind of sucks because it has a lot of potential. And that's also one of my gripes. This movie has a lot of this. It has a lot of great ideas, but I don't appreciate these ideas when it doesn't come to fruition, when it don't act on these ideas and just expand them and show us what they can do. Be creative with them, give them meaning. For example, Baloo is not a general lovable bear in this movie. No, he is kind of an asshole. I mean, he has the heart in the right place, but he's training the wolf, and he's training Mowgli, and he's kind of a sarge, and he's an old skipper, an old salesman who's just really rough around the edges, and he's going hard on you, but deep down that beats a heart of gold because he's care for you, but just want to make sure that you are ready to take on the world, to take on the harsh world and reality of the jungle and the jungle law. That's what he is. That is not the Baloo that I know, that I grew up with, so I appreciate that direction, but it doesn't really go anywhere because he's just a side character. He's hardly in the movie. He's just put in there a few places, and that is it. And the same goes for Shere Khan. Shere Khan is not really in the movie, even though he is the main villain. He's the reason that this movie takes place. He's not really present there, and he even has a scarred or damaged paw. I don't know what happened, but it is a nice characteristic of him. But it doesn't really apply to the movie, except that we just made him humps. So that's pretty much it. And also the fact that Shere Khan doesn't really feel intimidating, except for one scene. And that scene is quite intense. All I'm gonna say is it has something to do with a pond, and that's it. But that was a great scene. That's suspenseful. But other than that, Shere Khan wasn't really that intimidating. Not like Idris Elba in the other Jungle Book movie. Because whenever he was present in a scene, you just felt his authority. And I kind of wanted that here. I mean, he doesn't need to be big and hulking, but he needs to be intimidating. I didn't really feel that here. And then there's the fact that this movie, at a lot of points, unfortunately, is extremely cheesy, and it doesn't really want to be cheesy, and even sometimes it wants to be dramatic, but since it doesn't focus enough on these aspects of the movie, it doesn't really pay off and just come as cheesy and over dramatic, and it just takes you out of the movie and you just stop up and laugh at it because it's fucking ridiculous. This movie tries to be so edgy, it really hurts, and it's not even rated R or anything, but it's bloody, let's say that. So whenever animals fight, they get wounds and you see blood. Fine, I have no problem with that. But it just tries so hard to be dark without embracing it. It's just trying to be, but doesn't really pull it off. So you're just stuck with something that tries to be edgy, but ends up being kind of cringy. Just not genuine. But it just seems like this movie just really hardly wanted to impress you with its dark and edginess, but it just comes off goofy. So this movie could have been great. It could have been awesome, especially because it tries to establish something different. But it's just too mangled up. It's just too disjointed. It has a lot of things it wants to do, and it ended up doing nothing really. And I don't know if this is meant to be a starting point for a franchise. I have no idea. It might be, but I can't really see why, because they kind of finished the story at the end. But in the end, this movie is just fine. I mean, it's good visuals, some good characters, but it just drops it all on the floor. And are you really gonna watch it? I don't know. I mean, you could. It's a different experience for the Jungle Book story, but besides that, not really. And again, the title is called Mowgli, and you do follow Mowgli on his journey, but how much does Mowgli change from beginning to end, except that he wants to kill a tiger? How much did he learn from the humans? It's kind of trying to put these aspects against each other. His human side and his wolf side, but it don't really do anything with it. This movie wants to do stuff, but doesn't really do anything. So, Mowgli, a character piece on a boy that ends up with nothing, really. Nothing has changed. I would say that you should catch it on Netflix. My experience, well, at least I still got Daredevil. Wait, what? They cancel it? So I have actually wondered if I should make a video on that subject, but I don't really know yet. I have to clear my head before I go down that shit part. But anyway, Mowgli, have you seen it? What did you think about it? And how do you think it ranks against the 90s Jungle Book movie? You know, the live action one where he was a young adult or in his 20s or something. It is a really weird movie, really cheesy. I love it. Because it's 90s and 90s knew what they were. Weird. Not 80s weird, not that weird, but kind of different weird. How do you think it ranks amongst that one? And how do you think it ranks amongst the depiction of the Jungle Book story so far? What is your favorite, even? Whatever you think, comment below with your thoughts. And as always, until I see you in the next video, remember to stay awesome. Bye! Does he say bare necessities because he's a bear? Holy shit, I haven't realized that before now.